Okay. You know, there's been a lot of talk over the years about the idea of min-maxing in TTRPGs and why it's a bad thing because, as many people have pointed out, having the idea of planning your character progression before you actually make the character is kind of antithetical to a lot of people's ideas of what a TTRPG should be. Kind of have to agree with that, honestly. And I decided to use as an example Stars, the game that over 20 years ago is what really taught me what min maxing actually means. And just like, oh, I'll just throw something together. No. If you want to have a race that actually excels, you don't just throw something together. And that is actually one of those things that I find to be interesting because if you try to look at stars from an RP perspective, you can justify anything because of the fact that, well, that's just what this particular race happens to be and do, and so on and so forth. That logic actually works perfectly fine. It really does. So you don't actually have a reason to be concerned with having a alternate reality race that has a extremely high gravity requirement on planets because that's just what your particular alternate reality race happens to be. It's a logic that works regardless of why it's there. Anyway, so let's just look over this quick and discuss just what it is about stars that makes it so ridiculous in terms of min maxing. Okay, so yeah, by the way, I'm not these don't actually expand all that much. So there's 7 or 6 presets. These presets are actually kind of boring, and the game will I mean, they're playable, but they don't do anything special. If you want, you can try one of them, but um they don't actually have all of the options for main racial traits. No, there's 6 of them, and there's, I think, 10 main racial traits. Yeah, you have to do custom races to get certain of the main racial traits. Flags, whatever. There's no advantage points associated with flags. You just choose one that so that no 2 players are using the same flag. That's the only reason why anyone cares about flags. Also, starting with 25 advantage points. Think about that. Up to 50 left over on one of several things. Now, there's options that could actually be strategically important if you want to have a quick early start there, but I'm not going to worry about that. It's like here's the list of options. Like defenses is not something that I would personally go for. Factories or mines, though, maybe depending on what your race is. Because if you're a race that needs more, well then. Anyways, primary trait. I could look at this, but this is really just this, but not expanded. Anyways, hyper expansion. This is a race that needs a high habitability rating because of the fact that you need to colonize a really, really large number of planets, and it's expand or die. You need to have dozens of planets, or you're not going to accomplish much of anything. And there's not really a huge number of advantages to hyper expansion, honestly. Is generally considered one of the weaker main racial traits. Notably, though, each of the main racial traits has a value in advantage points. Um, uh, it doesn't say what that is here. Yeah. Anyways, and the main racial trait you choose affects the cost of everything you put into your race because of the fact that certain combinations are just inherently better than others. Therefore, it costs more to make those combinations than to have normal stuff. Well, other things. There's several other things with this, though. Is like the whole like hyper expansion races don't have the ability to build stargates because, well, the way this game works, every major racial trait has some critical weakness. Lack of stargates is the one for hyper expansion, and while that isn't much of a disadvantage early game, the later you get into the game, the more of a disadvantage it becomes. Now, the flux capacitor is an interesting one because it gives hyperexpansion races a option for heavy beam offense that other races just can't touch. However, that doesn't mean that they're particularly good at combat. It just means that they have a combat option that other races don't get. Space demolition. These guys hyperexpansion hates because hyperexpansion needs to have huge numbers of ships everywhere. And space demolition races throwing a minefield out and then blowing it up. Well, that can blow up dozens of ships from a hyperexpansion race with the mines. Kind of painful. Space demolition is actually one of those. It's just kind of eh, because they have a lot of advantages that aren't, critically interesting, but they're just there. Like they get to scan enemy ships by blowing them up with mines. That's a fun trick. Really is too. Oh, also, since these numbers, that's the amount of damage the mine does. Heavily armored late game ships really don't need to worry about mines the same way that early game ships do because of the fact that late game, your armor is actually going to be able to shrug off the amount of damage. 200 damage from heavy mines will hurt early game. Dum, 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 dum. One of the things about this one though is that remember what I was saying about weaknesses. Okay, there might be a few exceptions to the whole like this race has a critical weakness thing. It's kind of just doesn't really have a whole lot of strengths. It doesn't have a particular critical weakness, but its strength actually isn't as great as people would want it to be. Because yes, it has some cool tricks, but it's also one of the more subtle. And I guess you could say that its weakness is that strength isn't actually all that good. Actually, to be honest, in the metagame thing of like playing against other players, this is actually a very good race because of the fact that it doesn't actually have a weakness. Anyways, packet physics. This is a race that does the finger of God thing and can obliterate opposing colonies at will because they can. Packet physics uses mass packets where you are basically taking materials and relocating them from one planet to another, not necessarily a planet you control. And the number of or quantity of things you do with mass drivers is pretty impressive, honestly. And a packet physics race can kill off the entire population of an opposing planet just by flinging a giant mineral packet at it. Yeah. Also, they can terraform things permanently. Yeah, permaforming in this game is a weird thing because, like, planets have starting stats, and I like see here is that a planet's starting stat is somewhere in this range here. Well, permaforming means changing the value of the starting stat. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a thing. Now, see, in the case of packet physics races, having your starting or your preferred areas be something weird, like instead of having the red in the center here, you could put the red off to the left side. Why? Because when you do the permaforming thing, it moves it towards what you like, your ideal. If your ideal is different from theirs, then oh, wait, sucks to be them. Again, min maxing hell, straight up. Th- This is aspect of race design in stars. 'Cause I could go back to do all 10 of the main traits, but that'll take a while. This is the aspect of stars that has the most min maxing to it. If I remember correctly, there are 300 s- stages of expansion for the, the was it 300? Was it 200? I haven't played this game in years. I don't even know that if it's compatible with any modern operating systems. Anyway, though, growth rate obviously has that. Note how this says one and two planets. This is over half of the bar. Now, a planet with this amount, stretching the blue bar to cover everything, you're only going to have the ones that have it in the middle as being ideal for your race. The ones off to the sides will be habitable and give you positive value, but not. Um, I guess the best way to put it is they're not ideal, so you have a reduced habitability amount. And that's a major thing in this game is that planet population caps are, well, just remember population caps are usually fixed. Growth rates, though, are a major deal here because of the fact that planets need to have a high population in order to man factories and mines, which are your main basic production technologies. Well, the number of factories and mines you have on a planet is based on the number of population you have on the planet. The rate at which your population grows determines the number of factories and mines you can have on a planet. So if you have a really slow growth rate and your population just isn't doing anything, well, that's a problem because you won't get enough uh, resources in order to do anything. Again, there's a reason why I call it min max hell because of the fact that it does not really track logically in some ways because population growth has a minimum due to the way that the game stores population values and it population will go up by the minimum amount as long as you have positive population growth. Yes, negative population growth is a thing in this game. You can have a planet where, due to the fact that it's outside your habitability range, you are having people die every turn. That is absolutely a thing that can happen in this game. No, having a low growth rate does not change that, though. Yeah, that works like a completely different mechanic than growth does. Uh, there is a race that can actually handle that though, which is the screwball part. Because again, every race has their own unique strengths and weaknesses, and some of them are more different than others in terms of strategy. All right. Um. Oh yeah, there's this one. This is another thing that is really, really min maxing. It's like the number of factories you have, the number of mines you have, the cost of the factories you have, the cost of the mines you have, the actual effectiveness of the mines and factories you have. All of those stats are things that will drastically change the way your race plays out. Because if you want a race that does like super, super fast expansion, you know, the more mines and factories you plan on building over the course of a game, the greater the value of reducing their cost. Because over the course of a game, if you only build 30 mines, that's a handful of resources. But if you build 300, that's a lot. So, one thing that I've actually done is reducing the numbers and increasing cost. That is absolutely something that you can do. Or increasing or increasing the value or increasing the quantity of material you get from mines while making them more expensive. Again, you can do that. Not saying it's a good idea, but it's something you can do. For if it matches with the general strategy you're going to be employing. Because this game, despite being something from the 90s that was made to work in Windows 3, is genuinely a really, really deep strategy game because of just how many options there are in that have a drastic effect on the game. Now, I'm not saying the options are equal. They're not. They really are not equal. Like low starting population. Choosing this as a hyper expansion race just makes sense because of the fact that it only affects your starting population. After game start, it does nothing. And high hyper expansion race, expanding super fast, it'll be a few turns before it's completely gone. Initial population reduced by 30%. Um, and you get 60 points for that. Remember, I said earlier about how you start at 25. This gives you 60. Is it one of the most expensive things? No, but it is significant. Oh yeah, and also if you're interstellar packet physics and have those races can start with a second planet, which is a major advantage. Uh, Granted, the second planet isn't something that's actually going to be good most of the time. Usually, it's something that's weak colony, but um, low starting population affects all of your starting population. Anyway, though, but yeah, it's like for hyper expansion, that's almost a free advantage thing because of the fact that their population expands so quickly. And again, certain races have racial attack stuff that makes no advanced scanners a minor inconvenience. Certain races need advanced scanners or they will suck for the entire game. So races that need them, well, they're not going to choose this. Improved star bases, alternate reality races almost always take this because of the fact that an alternate reality race's population cap is determined by the starbase size, and this increases the number of options you have for starbase sizes. Therefore, alternate reality races have a much greater value for this than everyone else does. And, that's fine, I guess. Yeah, see, the space stock is also an interesting thing because it is the only thing in the game that has a capped build size for ships. Yeah, see, 200 KT space stock. What that means is that the ships you build cannot have a weight higher than 200. Uh, yeah, okay. Someone who doesn't know anything about the game will be like, okay, what's that? Medium-sized ships. It can build some medium-sized ships. It can't build anything that's actually large. None of the other things have that because the lower one, which is an orbital whatever thingy, doesn't have a space dock at all. It can't build ships. It's a star base, but it's a star base that can't build ships. The regular star base, it's very similar to this. It's just smaller. This is really just like an upscaled version of the regular starbase thing that everyone starts with a regular starbase. Yeah, notice how this says like 16 on weapons and shield and armor 20. It's be like 12 and 16 or so 12 and 15 or something like that. Anyway, though. Yeah, this is oh yeah, orbital fort. That's what the thing is called, like starbase. Huh. Why does orbital fort redirect here? Whoever made this is you that's an incorrect redirect because orbital fort is different from a space dock. Really? Whatever. Anyway, so this is something that you would want to have if you're planning to build a crap ton of star bases. Or at the very least are planning to or want to have really, really powerful star bases. Because it does both of those things. Also, in this game, you need a star base to build ships. Having cheap star bases lets you have more shipyards because, yeah, that's a thing. A race that has all of their star bases destroyed can't build ships. You can build star bases without having your star base in orbit. I mean, that seems logical. You just can't build ships, if I remember correctly, anyways. And of course, having your ships go to a star base, they get repaired. This um, number limitation also affects repair, I think. I don't remember though. Anyway, though, again, like I was saying about min maxing, is that all of these choices are things that, while they do make a whole lot of sense in terms of giving variety and things, this is part of what makes this so deep strategically is that this is basically all of the game options put together in a single bin. Like looking at this from a TTRPG perspective, um, i- primary traits are character classes: a packet physics race, an interstellar traveler race, a warmonger, a claim adjuster, inner strength, alternate reality, jack of all trades. Each of those is functionally a different character class. And these are secondary traits that, you know what, certain main traits have an intense use for these. Certain ones don't. So a TTRPG would probably not give you the option to choose all of these at will. I mean, it depends on the TTRPG, obviously, but some of them will, some of them won't. And of course, this stuff here is just nitpicky. TTRPGs don't have this level of nuts and bolts usually because, like, the whole advantage points thing for main traits and secondary traits, that is actually pretty reasonable in terms of comparing it to a TTRPG. The nuts and bolts of population range. Oh boy, the nuts and bolts of population range and population effectiveness is just ridiculous, and no one would do that in a TTRPG. Now, they might do something vaguely similar where they have um, scaling options for this and that and the other thing, but not to the level this does, because there are literally several thousand possibilities for this. Oh, I forgot to get to the research cost thing. Yeah, there are six tech research fields in this game, and while maxing them early is something that seems improbable, hefty tech research is actually a major advantage and isn't necessarily something that you should dismiss. Because fighting a race that has more powerful technology than you do is a major problem. If your enemy ships are heavily armored with armor that you can't touch, hey, you know what? That could be a major issue. Now, personally, I feel that this game's tech tree is really most memorable mid game because the top tier techs in the game are not racial techs. And when you get to the top tier techs, a lot of the racial techs are functionally obsolete. I say a lot, not all of them. Some of the racial techs, especially interstellar travelers racial techs, are things that you do not get until late game. And they are things that other races wish that they had the ability to continue researching things to that level in the game. It's like this thing here. This is a late game tech that you will not get until you have almost completely maxed out the text tree. But it lets you send your ships anywhere to any Stargate anywhere else in the galaxy. Boom. You can even attack people because they have a Stargate by jumping to their Stargate. Yeah, that is a massive advantage. Massive. And it's something they don't get late till late game and doesn't ever become obsolete. That's part of what makes Interstellar Traveler one of the most powerful races in the metagame, though. And also, it's like this antimatter generator thing, which gives them um, fuel production on ships that wouldn't otherwise have it. It's just okay. That's a useful toy. Yeah. Um, they suck at using mass drivers. That's their limitation, which means that if they're up against a packet physics race, the packet physics race can just kill them with mass drivers. Yeah. Oh, there's so many more things I could go into here. Okay, so yeah. Flame adjuster. This is a race that's really, really good at terraforming. Remember what I said about this is that with a claim adjuster race, the terraforming is automatic. So having a well, with claim adjuster, you need to have powerful terraforming technology. So claim adjusters will probably have total terraforming because the terraforming costs 30% less, doesn't matter to them. However, it's the plus or minus 30% terraforming that really, really matters. And that, when it says 30%, it means 30% of the total length of this bar. That is a huge advantage. And well, like for this example here, 30% terraforming. You don't even need 30% terraforming to get every planet in the galaxy to be habitable by your race. race. Not necessarily ideal, but habitable. That is something that would be okay. Realistically, this particular set of stats here is something that a lot of races wouldn't have because the fact that in order to make the race work, you need, let's just say, um, more advantage points to play with, and reducing your habitability range is a great way to get more advantage points when you need them. Because again, it's like you start with 25 advantage points. If you need 60 to purchase a lesser trait, well, you have to find those somewhere, don't you? And reducing your habitability range, quick and easy. Fun fact with radiation is that reducing your habitability range so that the midpoint of your habitability range is at 85 or higher. There is actually an engine technology in the game called a radiating hydro ram scoop that actually the population kill effect on it only happens if your race is has a low midpoint for the or moderate midpoint for the radiation part. If you set your range, if you set that high enough to the right, you won't have a population die due to the radiating hydro scoop. Does this sound like a good thing to you? Yeah. Like I said, min max hell. This game, creating races, is if you really, really want to make it the best thing you possibly can, it is absolutely min max hell because there's so many things to tinker with, so many moving parts, and what is considered good is based on on the strategy that the player playing it is going to take. The way that the player plays the race in this game has almost as much effect on end result as what the stats are, but the stats determine how you can play the game. So, mm, yeah. Well, like for example, alternate reality races. Due to the way alternate reality races work, you will often see an alternate reality race have cost 50% less for energy research. I personally like to get the generalized research thing for alternate reality because I will quite often leave the alternate reality race constantly researching energy tech because of the fact that alternate reality races manufacturing ability is based on their energy tech level. Therefore, they need it to be as high as possible. Otherwise, they can't build stuff. Oh yeah, fun fact. This screen here is drastically different if you're an alternate reality race. It's the only one I know of that actually has one of these screens just completely changed. Oh well. Anyway, I'm going to call it here because like there's so many other things I could talk about that I would be going at this for hours. Like explaining why it is that inner strength having the ability for colonists to reproduce on freighters is such a big deal. It is a huge deal. Why? Because it lets you overpopulate planets. Overpopulating a planet has the colonists on the planet die off slowly, but it also gives you the ability to increase the number of mines and factories you have on a planet. And that is a huge advantage. And again, it's one of those things where it's like if you're planning on doing that, the way you set up your race is fundamentally different than if you weren't planning on doing that. So an inner strength race where someone is planning to build freighter fleets so that they can have giant piles of extra colonists is probably going to make different choices when min-maxing their race than someone who isn't. Oh, like I said, there are so many other things I could go into, like the nuts and bolts of options for alternate reality races. Why alternate reality races are terrified of warmonger races. Side note, alternate reality races, the entire planetary population gets killed off if the starbase gets destroyed. When you are attacking a planet, you can tell your fleet to prioritize the starbase so that they alpha strike the starbase as their primary target and completely ignore the fleet guarding the starbase. When that happens, um, the alternate reality race is going to get a Pyrrhic victory at best. The starbase got destroyed, which means the planet's no longer inhabited, which means that they might kill off the attacking fleet, but they lost a planet. And that is terrible. Because as I was saying earlier, is that colonists in this game are a resource that you need for everything. The more and that's what makes this advantage here so powerful is that having colonists on freighters reproduce uh, gives you so many more colonists that you can have otherwise. Like in a strength races, you send a colony ship to a planet and you only put half the people in it that you would normally put in. Why? Because they're going to reproduce en route, and so on and so forth. Oh boy. Anyway, yeah, I got along. Yeah, I just thought this would be a fun way to look at the concept of min maxing without actually, looking at a specific TTRPG. And it's something I have personal, detailed understand of. Alrighty then. See you later.